Cujo here, back with you after a long period of time. Sorry it's been a bit of a delay, but there's been a lot going on in my life. I put in one of the comments some time ago, but a couple years back, a little over 2 years actually, changed jobs, moved back to the Chicago area, and had to sell my share of my Arrow, which I miss. That Arrow was a great plane, flew really well, but I've been getting into this new job, and I joined a flight club here in the west suburbs of Chicago in Page. That's Delta Papa Alpha. And the club is pretty good, similar cost structure to what I had with my Arrow, and they have 4 planes, but it is a big club, so availability has been much worse than what I was used to with my Arrow. There's somewhere in the order of 80 something members in this club, so the 4 planes do get booked up. But as you can see behind me, they have Cessna 172. So this is 2001 Cessna 172 SP. They have an Archer, which is a 99 Piper Archer, and they do have an Arrow, a 77 Arrow 3, so it's a little different than the one I flew, but similar. And they recently got a Cirrus SR20, which I want to do a video on at some point, but they've got a bunch of restrictions on getting signed off for that. So that has not happened yet, plus the coronavirus situation has put things on hold for a while, so just getting back to flying now. But I figured as a good lead-in for a video, I haven't done a video in over 2 years, maybe I'd do a light video about high wing versus a low wing as I see it, because this is like an age-old discussion. You like high wing, you like low wing, how do they fly? They fly different. So, disclaimer, most of my time is in Pipers, so I have very little time in Cessnas, under 20 hours in Cessnas, but I have flown many different ages of Cessna, so I have some experience that I can talk to, and as I'll get into, the age of the Cessna makes a big difference. One thing I can say, I'll just put this out there up front, I'll go right to the end. They're both, if we're talking like an Archer or Warrior versus a 172, they're both airplanes. They both fly like the airplanes you trained on. You can fly them. If you've been doing all your time in Warriors or all your time in 172s, you can go to the other side. It's not that big of a deal. Honestly, it's kind of like riding a bike. But there are some significant differences, I guess. Advantages, disadvantages. And I'm going to go right into one of the things I don't like about high-wing aircraft on 172s. Yeah, you can fuel it up, or even check how much gas is in the tank. Got the Acrobat, get up here, and then you can't even see in there if it's not at the top. So you better always have one of these, or have access to it. Now, most gas pumps will have a ladder, just for this reason. But it's kind of a pain, I think. It's much easier to go up to the Warrior and check the gas or fuel. But that also comes with some advantages. You got both options on the fuel side. The gas tanks are above you, so you don't need that pump. Go both, you don't have to worry about changing left and right tanks in flight, which is kind of nice. The Cessna is a lot, I think, lighter on the controls. Controls much lighter than in the Pipers. The Pipers are a little more stiff. Part of that could be age, but it's also the way that the controls are actuated in the Cessna. So the Cessnas will feel a lot lighter in the controls compared to the Pipers, but they fly similar. One thing I can tell you, and I didn't fly a Cessna until I got my license. I flew a Warrior and an Archer before I got my license, and then I flew some Arrow, and then I flew a Cessna. And one thing that I noticed in flying the Cessna, this gear And the way that it lands is, the first time I did it, I said, "Wow, a monkey can land one of these." It just is way more forgiving than landing, a Piper product with the Oleo struts. Because, I mean, trust me, I did a lot of landings and my fair share of bad ones in my time. And if you do it in a Piper, you know it. I mean, it feels and sounds like the struts are going to come through the wings if you land it hard, which maybe it's just me. But I had a few hard landings in my training, and every now and then, I guess. But with this thing, you land and it's like you're on a pillow. I mean, this thing is just, and it's gentle. It comes down. I give you an idea. I just flew it for the first time in probably 6 months, 5-6 months or more, because of the COVID thing, and I've been flying the Aero more. And I greased 2 landings with a 10 knot crosswind in it, because it's just, and it's not my skill. They're just easy. Plus, it helps to be able to see out where the gear is for your flare. So that's a big difference that I think. I think landing these things is great. If I had my choice of something to land in, I would take a 172. Not that it's hard to land Pipers, but it's just, I think, less forgiving. One thing I could talk about for the flying characteristics is these things have been built since the 40s or 50s or something like that. It's a long time. The first one I flew was in 1964. It had like this little Continental 6-cylinder in it. It could not get out of its own way. I mean, I never saw 100 knots in that thing, not even close. It was about a 90-knot airplane. Terrible climb. But as we'll talk to in a minute, great for taking pictures. Took some great pictures in that Cessna, or I should say my wife did, looking out the side. But that thing had nothing. Like, I would not want to cross country with that, because it would take longer than driving. But that was a 64 Cessna. Then I flew in early, I think it was an 83 Cessna, and that had a Lycoming 160, 160, or sorry, 360. No, sorry, 320, 320, 160 horse. And that plane was fine. I would say it flew very similar to the Warrior, with some slight differences, as I mentioned. And then I've flown this SP, and I also flew like a 2010 SP in Arizona once. And in my opinion, completely different flying plane. These they have a 180 horse fuel injected Lycoming, similar to the Aero motor, derated, and they're spry. I mean, they'll do 120 something knots. You'll fly off the ground pretty well. It's actually, I like how these fly, these newer ones, the more modern Cessnas. I think they switched to that engine in early 90s or late 80s. But I'll say that it's very different when you go from a 64 Cessna 172 to a 2000s vintage, or it's 2001. So I'll say that, and I actually do like flying this plane. Whereas the older ones, I'll take a low wing. So that is a big difference. Now, the Pipers had some differences as well. For instance, a big one I've been noticing lately, my Aero was a 75 in Iowa, and that had what they call the Hershey bar wing. It didn't change. It wasn't. The new ones have a tapered wing, so it's more trapezoidal. And that is significantly different. I trained in newer Warriors and Archers that also had the trapezoidal wing. It's the newer wing. So the differences are the Hershey bar wing is faster, a little bit. You'll get a few knots faster, and it doesn't glide for anything. Whereas that trapezoidal tapered wing, they call it, that thing has a lot more glide to it. So note on that, if it's got the trapezoidal wing, if you come in hot, you will float in ground effect substantially. Okay, and I did that a lot in my training, because when you're trying to get your speed down, I floated down the runway something fierce with that. Whereas that Hershey bar wing, which I had in my Iowa Aero, I loved it because I got used to it, and that's what I learned on with the Aeros. And my instructor, first when I did my complex, he actually said, I think I actually read the comment, that the Arrow with the Hershey bar wing, you put the gear out and it glides like a greased crowbar, and that is, I would say, a good analogy. The thing, when I was doing my complex, my instructor said, "Oh, why don't we land at that airport down there?" And I looked down. I was literally looking down, and we were at, I don't know, 3,500 feet or something like that. And I'm looking down at it. So we were almost, not over it, but it was a couple miles away. And we were up fairly high. And I was like, "Oh, well, should I circle?" And he's like, "No, no, no, just put the gear down, and you'll make it." And I thought he was nuts, but we did. We dropped the gear, pulled the power back, and the thing, we made that landing, no problem. Had plenty. It didn't have to do anything special. No spiral pattern, no nothing. So Hershey bar wing glides like a greased crowbar. Tapered wing will float like a son of a gun if you come in with too much speed. And the Arrow in this club has the tapered wing, so that's been a challenge, a bit of a challenge for me. I mean, my landings have not been greasers like they were with my Arrow in Iowa. I've got to fly more, and I'll work on that. But so those are the major differences, honestly, Piper and Cessna. So overall, newer 172 is really nice flying plane, I have to say. And I know why they're the most popular trainer, because, like I said, you can land on a pillow with these spring steel gear. Pipers are fine. That's what I learned on. I fly them a lot. But if you land a little hard, you'll feel and hear the thud, and you'll feel like you want to check your wing afterwards if you make a hard one. The problem with, if you do come in hot with this and try and plant it, you could bounce though, so that's another disadvantage. I've never come close to that with the Cessna, but like I said, I have minimal time. So be careful with that. Other than that, very similar planes. You can fly both. Another advantage though, 2 doors. 2 doors. I do like the egress with 2 doors. The Pipers, for whatever reason, they always have the 1 door on the passenger side. Makes it kind of a pain in the butt, especially if you're taking people for the first time and have to explain to them that they get in last. It's kind of odd. And if you're ever in an accident or something, I've always wondered about that, if your door jams. Had the family in it today, 4 of us, 2 doors, relatively simple. Get in and out. I will say I don't like the seat belts. It's kind of funky, but that's just a preference thing. And you feel more like you're sitting up in a pickup truck in this guy, whereas in a low wing you're in a car position, which I'm more of a car guy. But subtle things. Overall, I would recommend both. And if you haven't, if you're just getting out of your training or in training and you're focusing on one or the other, or thinking about taking training and wondering which one to use, probably want to focus in your training, but as soon as it makes sense, I encourage you to try different things. Like I said, I want to try that Cirrus as soon as it makes sense, but they've got some really crazy requirements to do that. So one of these days, and then I'll try and bring you guys along for one of those flights, because that's got to be different, the side stick. Okay, let's take you inside the 172. Okay, watch. Oh, here's another tip. My instructor, when I first went in a Cessna, he warned me about the flaps, the diamond print forehead mark. He says it's kind of an indoctrination when you're flying Cessnas. Everyone does it. You're not looking. You whack the forehead on on the trailing edge of the flap, and then you get a red diamond print across your head. So I haven't done that yet, knock on wood, but yeah, it feels like it can happen. So here's that gear. Very simple, right? I mean, it's a spring steel gear. You see it out the window as you're landing, no one to flare. In my opinion, makes it easy peasy. I will say the cabin width feels tight in a 172 to me. It's not a whole lot smaller than a Piper, but it feels tight. Seat belts come from the top and kind of a car style, and then the seat belts, you can never get this part without opening the door. It's kind of I don't know. I don't like it, but again, it's probably a bias. You got the both selector. And throttles, older Pipers had throttles like this too, but a lot of the, most Pipers have the throttle quadrant with the levers, whereas these are the pull, push, they're not quite vernier, I guess, but this one might be. But similar like a beach throttle. So that's a little different, but you know, really it's very similar. And photography, you talked about that. So you go out the window here. You got the strut that's kind of in the way, but if you do a pylon turn correctly, you got a good view down below. Although, when you're turning, in this case it would be for a right base, you lose sight of that airport, which is no fun. Where to go? Oh, there it is. Where's the traffic? Where is it? Where? Oh, there it is. I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover, but it was, like I said, it was good to get back to doing videos, and I've got a few other ideas in mind. I'm actually also calling around and starting to plan doing my instrument. So once that starts happening, I think we'll have some good material. I know I'm currently scouring the internet for any kind of instrument flying videos I can find, so we'll do some of that. Okay? Thanks, guys, and I will be with you hopefully very soon so we can start doing videos again. Thanks.